I wasn't being nosy. Not really. It's just that the package had been sitting there for 2 full days. Apartment 4B was always quiet. Lights off most evenings. No smells of food, no music, just the occasional shuffle of feet behind the door. I'd seen the guy maybe twice in the 2 years I lived across the hall. Thin, pale, always wearing a baseball cap even indoors. Gave off major, don't talk to me energy. But this package, it was different. Big, rectangular, and heavy enough that the delivery guy had to grunt when he dropped it off. It sat there like it was waiting to be noticed. And I couldn't stop noticing. By the end of day 2, it started raining. I watched from my peephole as water pooled around the box. Finally, I cracked. I knocked on 4B's door. No answer. I knocked again. Nothing. So, I brought it inside my place. Just to keep it dry. That's how it started. I didn't mean to open it. I swear. But it wasn't sealed properly, and when I tilted it to move it, the flap slid open just an inch. Inside was a stack of journals. Black, leather-bound, no titles. Dozens of them. Tied together in 2 neat rows with twine. I could have stopped there. I should have. But something about it felt personal. Like a message meant for someone, even if that someone wasn't me. I opened the first one. It wasn't a journal. Not exactly. More like letters. Every page started with the same line. To the person I hope finds this. The handwriting was small, neat, a little shaky in places. The entries were dated, too, starting 5 years ago. They read like confessions. Regrets. Pieces of a story told in puzzle form. I read 1. Then 2. Then 10. They were all written by the man in 4B. He talked about mistakes he'd made, people he'd hurt, the guilt he carried. But he never said names. Just hints. A sister he hadn't spoken to. A friend who vanished after a fight. A lie that ruined someone's life. And then the last line of the 10th journal stopped me cold. If you're reading this, I'm probably already gone. I stared at my wall, where I knew just a few feet away his apartment sat dark and silent. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I knocked again. Still nothing. So I called the landlord. And what he told me changed everything. The landlord said the guy in 4B hadn't paid rent in over a month. Honestly, he added, I figured he moved out. Left the keys in the mailbox, no damage, no mess. Quiet guy. Didn't give us trouble. That didn't line up. Why would someone just leave like that? And leave behind a box of handwritten confessions? I asked if anyone had come to pick up his stuff. The landlord shook his head. Didn't have much to take. Bed, a couple chairs, that's it. I didn't tell him about the journals. Something told me I shouldn't. Instead, I started reading more of them. Slowly. Like sipping something too hot. The entries jumped around in time. One moment he was a teenager skipping class. The next, he was writing about an older woman named Ellie who always wore red and smelled like burnt sugar. He said she was the only person who ever told him he was worth more than his worst day. He never said what happened to her. The tone shifted around Journal 6. It got heavier. More cryptic. He mentioned a man named Cal, then abruptly stopped writing about him. A few pages later, a single sentence. I shouldn't have walked away from Cal. That one stayed with me. The thing was, I couldn't tell if he was writing fiction, or if this was all real. It felt real. Painfully so. Especially the entries where he talked about silence. Silence is heavy, one read. Heavier than a lie. On the 4th day, something strange happened. I came home from work and saw a new envelope slipped under my door. No name. Just a blank white envelope. Inside was a photo. Faded. 2 boys, maybe teenagers, standing in front of an ice cream shop. One of them was wearing that same baseball cap. The other had his arms slung around him like they were brothers or best friends. On the back, a single word was written, Cal. That night, I went through every journal again, looking for any clue, any date, any place. I found one mention, a town called Waterton, 2 states away. Population, barely 4,000. And I made a decision I didn't fully understand yet. I packed a bag, put the journals in the trunk of my car, and started driving toward a place I'd never heard of, chasing someone I didn't know, just to understand a story I'd accidentally stepped into. Waterton looked like a town frozen in late October, even though it was mid-spring. Quiet streets, hand-painted signs, and a diner that looked like it hadn't changed its menu since the 80s. I parked outside a motel that smelled like old pine cleaner and checked in under my real name, though I wasn't sure why I felt weird doing it. Maybe because I still didn't know what I was doing there. I started with the diner. Places like that always had a resident talker. Sure enough, the woman behind the counter, name tag said Luann, was thrilled to have someone new to talk to. I asked if she knew anyone named Cal. Her eyebrows raised. Cal Morris. I nodded, pretending that name sounded familiar. Yeah, she said, flipping a pancake with a practiced wrist. He lives out by the lake. Works with the vet sometimes, does odd jobs. Quiet type. You a friend of his? I hesitated. Something like that. She gave me directions scribbled on a napkin. Lake Road, past the orchard, second driveway with a blue mailbox. It sounded more like a riddle than an address. When I got there, I stayed in the car a full minute before getting out. The house was small and square, with a wraparound porch and wind chimes that danced without making a sound. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. Then I heard it, a dog barking, then a voice calling out, "Hold on. I'm coming." Cal was younger than I expected. Late 30s, maybe. Tall. His face was immediately familiar. It was him in the photo, standing beside the man from 4B. I told him my name. Told him I found something that might belong to him. Then I showed him the photo. His face changed slowly. Recognition, confusion, pain. "Where'd you get this?" he asked. "From a man named." I realized then I didn't know his real name. The journals never said. He lived in 4B. In my building. He left this behind, and a lot of writing. Cal's hands were shaking as he took the photo. He used to call himself Jack. But his name was Theo. Theo Rains. That name hit the air like a confession. Cal stepped back, opened the door wider. "You better come in," he said. "There's a lot you don't know." Cal's house was warm in that lived-in way, scuffed floors, mismatched mugs, a couch that sighed when you sat on it. A golden retriever named Scout followed me from room to room like I was already family. Cal made coffee without asking and poured it into 2 chipped mugs. He sat across from me, both hands wrapped around his cup like he needed the heat. "You said he left journals?" I nodded and placed one of them on the table between us. Cal stared at it like it might burn him. He used to write all the time. Even when we were kids. Letters, stories, napkin poems. Never let anyone read them. I hesitated. "He wrote about you. A lot. Mostly without saying your name. But I think you mattered to him." Cal gave a hollow laugh. "Yeah, we mattered to each other. Until we didn't." He didn't say anything for a while. Just sipped his coffee and stared out the window like the trees might give him better words. Theo and I grew up together. Same foster home. He was the first person who really saw me. But he was complicated. He carried guilt like it was stitched into his skin. "What happened between you?" I asked. He didn't flinch. I asked him to stay. After everything. After he found out about Ellie. My heart jumped. "Ellie, the woman in red?" He nodded slowly. "She was my aunt. Took us both and after the system spat us out. Gave us something like a home. She passed suddenly." Theo blamed himself. Thought he should have seen the signs. But there were no signs. I remembered what he wrote. I shouldn't have walked away from Cal. Why didn't he come back? I asked quietly. Cal's voice cracked. He was ashamed. Thought I hated him. Thought he wrecked everything. And maybe I let him believe that. I opened the journal again and read a line aloud. "To the person I hope finds this, please tell Cal I tried. I tried to be good, even when I didn't know how." Cal looked like he'd been punched in the chest. He reached for the journal, fingers trembling. "Can I read the rest?" "Of course," I said. "There's more. Dozens more." And right then, I knew this trip wasn't just about curiosity anymore. It was about delivering something that mattered, to someone who'd been waiting for years without knowing it. I stayed in Waterton longer than I meant to. What was supposed to be a one-night stop turned into 3 days of coffee, quiet conversations, and old memories unfolding like letters that had never been sent. Cal read every journal. Not in one sitting, he took his time, sometimes closing one after a single page, staring out at the lake for an hour before picking it up again. I think he needed the space between the sentences. Sometimes, I'd find him reading aloud to Scout in a low voice, pausing when his throat caught. He never apologized for getting emotional. And I never made him feel like he should. On the second night, he pulled out a box from his closet. Inside were things Theo had left behind the first time he'd left Waterton, a cassette tape, a drawing of a treehouse they'd built as teenagers, and a crumpled envelope labeled, "For later. If I never come back." I never opened it, Cal admitted. I think I was angry. Or scared. Or both. We sat at his kitchen table, the envelope between us. His hands hovered over it for a while. Then finally, he opened it. Inside was a letter, written in Theo's same neat, anxious handwriting. "Cal, if you're reading this, I either chickened out again or something worse happened. I've never been good at endings, so I wrote you one. Not because I'm gone, but because I need you to know that you were the best chapter. The safe part. The quiet after the storm. You once told me love means staying. I'm sorry I didn't. But I carried you with me. In every bus ride, every late-night walk, every cup of coffee where I left a seat empty and hoped somehow you'd walk in. I hope you still build things. I hope you still laugh in your sleep. I hope you forgive me, even if I never hear it. Love always, T. When Cal looked up from the letter, there were tears on his cheeks. He didn't speak. Just reached out and placed his hand over mine, a silent thank you I could feel in my chest. That night, as I packed to leave, he stopped me at the door. He didn't get to say goodbye, Cal said. But you did that for him. You gave his words a place to land. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Then he said something I didn't expect. Come back sometime. Bring a journal. Write your own. I drove home with the journals still in the trunk. Cal had asked for copies. He wanted to transcribe them, share them with people who knew Theo, maybe even donate them to the town library. Not because he was famous, he said, but because he was real. The drive felt different this time. Lighter. Like I'd just returned something important that never should have been lost. I kept thinking about that last line in Theo's letter. I hope you forgive me, even if I never hear it. It stayed with me. Because sometimes, the apology we need most doesn't come from the person who hurt us. Sometimes, it comes from someone who finally sees the whole picture and decides to carry it forward. A few days later, I was back in my apartment, staring at my own quiet hallway. For B was still empty. But now, it didn't feel forgotten. It felt paused. Like the kind of silence that comes after a really good story, one that deserves a moment to settle. Then, one evening, another package showed up outside my door. No return address. Just my name. Inside was a small black notebook. Blank. And a note. You spent so long reading my story, I thought you might want to write your own. Start anywhere. Just start. T. I stood there holding it for a long time, thumb brushing over the cover. And I smiled. Because somehow, even after everything, Theo had found a way to give me one last nudge. So I sat down, opened the first page, and wrote. This all started with a package that wasn't mine, but maybe it found me on purpose. And that was it. The full circle. Not with fanfare or some perfect final line, but with the quiet click of a pen on paper and the feeling that something had shifted, something small but permanent. Life didn't magically transform after that. I still spilled coffee. I still forgot to return library books. But I started noticing things more. The way people carry stories and the way they pause mid-sentence. The way some silences aren't empty at all. A few weeks later, I got a postcard from Waterton. No return address, no signature, just a picture of the lake at sunset, and 5 words in familiar handwriting. He forgave me. Thank you. I pinned it to my fridge next to a takeout menu and a drawing my niece made of a dinosaur that apparently works in accounting. Every so often, I still take out that blank notebook Theo sent. I haven't filled it. Not yet. But sometimes, late at night, I'll flip to a fresh page and write a line. A single moment. A fragment. I think Theo would have liked that. Not rushing. Just starting. Letting things unfold the way they were meant to. And if I've learned anything from this whole strange, beautiful story, it's that the smallest action, like picking up a package that isn't yours, might lead to something big. Not in the loud, headline-making way, but in the way that matters. The kind of big that changes how you see the world. And if you're lucky, how you see yourself. Sometimes, I still wonder why the package was delivered to my door and not someone else's. Maybe it was a mistake. Or maybe it was one of those moments that looks random until you look back and realize it wasn't at all. I never saw Theo again. Not in person. But he shows up in unexpected ways, a stranger on the train scribbling in a notebook, a photo half-tucked in a library book, someone pausing too long at the edge of a memory. And when I think of him, I don't think of the man who vanished from 4B. I think of the boy in the photo with his arm around a friend. I think of the letter he left behind, the silence he tried to turn into something that could speak. Most of all, I think of the way his story, unfinished and raw, folded into mine. Not to take it over, but to remind me that stories, even the messy ones, are meant to be shared. Even the ones we're scared to tell. So, here's what I know. Life rarely announces the important moments. They show up quietly. In misdelivered packages. In letters that take years to arrive. In blank notebooks waiting on a shelf. And when they do, we get a choice. Ignore them. Or open them. I opened mine. And it changed everything. And now, the journals are gone, left with Cal, where they belong, but I still think about them. Sometimes I wonder who else has pieces of Theo's story without realizing it. A coffee shop owner he once scribbled a poem for on a napkin. A bus driver he thanked every morning for 10 straight weeks. A stranger who held the door open on a day he almost didn't walk through it. We all leave traces behind. Most go unnoticed. But some find their way to someone who's paying attention. And I think maybe that was my role, not to fix anything, not to rewrite history, just to notice, to listen, to carry the story a little farther down the road. And I have, quietly, in little ways. I've started writing letters to people I never had the courage to thank. I leave them in places I know they'll find, bookstore shelves, library desks, a cafe in Waterton. I never sign them. It feels better that way. Like I'm part of something bigger than my own story. Like I'm passing on the thing Theo gave me, the gift of being seen. It's funny how the story of a quiet man in apartment 4B became the loudest turning point in my life. And all because I couldn't leave a wet cardboard box alone. So if you're ever faced with a moment like that, a moment that feels small but tugs at you, open the box. Ask the question. Read the journal. Because sometimes, the twist at the end of someone else's story becomes the beginning of your own. And maybe, just maybe, that's the whole point. Not to understand every detail or tie up every thread, but to carry something forward, to let someone else's unfinished story crack something open in you. These days, I still live in the same apartment. The hallway's just as quiet. But I see it differently now. Every door feels like it could be a story waiting to be told. Every neighbor, even the ones I haven't met, might be holding something they don't know how to let go of. Sometimes I wonder if someone will find my story one day, half-written in the margins of notebooks, tucked inside old shoeboxes, passed along one conversation at a time. And I hope they do. I hope they read it the way I read Theo's, slowly, curiously, with their whole heart. Because what started with a single act of curiosity, a package on a doorstep, turned into a quiet revolution in my life. It taught me that stories don't always begin at the beginning, and they rarely end where we expect. Sometimes, they begin in the middle of someone else's. Sometimes, they end with a new beginning for you. So here's what I leave you with, whoever you are, wherever this finds you. Be the person who picks up the box. Who asks? Who listens? Because there's always someone, somewhere, hoping their story lands in the hands of a stranger who's willing to care. And if you're still with me, reading this, feeling the quiet pull of something familiar in someone else's life, then maybe that stranger is you. Maybe you've already carried stories you didn't know were stories. Maybe you've held on to a sentence someone said in passing that somehow shaped you. Maybe you've been the one to quietly notice, to gently ask, to simply stay when someone needed it most. We never really know how far the impact of a small kindness can travel, or how deeply a simple act, like keeping something dry in the rain, can ripple through a life. I never told many people what happened with Theo, or Cal, or the journals. It didn't seem like something the world needed a headline for. But I wrote it down, not to make it neat or tidy or profound, just to make it real, to remember. Because in the end, it wasn't a dramatic twist or a shocking revelation that changed everything. It was this. I answered the door. I opened the box. And I chose to care about someone I didn't know. That's the twist no one expects. That sometimes, the most life-altering thing you can do is show up. And so, this is where the story settles, not with a grand finale or a cinematic fade-out, but with the soft echo of something real, something lived, something passed from one set of hands to another. Not every story needs a climax to matter. Some just need to be received, witnessed, remembered. I still walk past 4B sometimes and catch myself pausing. Not out of sadness, really more like a quiet acknowledgement. A nod to the moment that changed the direction of my life without me even realizing it at the time. The journals, the letters, the drive to Waterton, they're part of me now. Etched into the way I see people, the way I write, the way I wait a second longer when someone seems like they want to say something but can't quite find the words. And once in a while, when the moment feels right, I leave something behind, a note, a page, a line that meant something to me, just in case the right person finds it. Because if there's one thing Theo taught me, it's this. Even when we think we're lost, even when we feel invisible or unfinished, there is always someone out there who might one day see us. Not for who we pretended to be, or who we failed to become, but for who we were, honestly, messily, completely. And that's enough to keep going, to keep writing, to keep opening the next page, even when we don't know what's coming. And maybe that's the quiet power of it all, not in the way stories explode into big endings, but in the way they leave something behind in you, something still unfolding, a shift, a softness, a seed. I never expected any of this. I didn't go looking for it. But it found me anyway, because I paused. Because I asked. Because I cared, even just a little. And if you've read this far, maybe you're that kind of person too, the kind who sees the cracks and doesn't look away. The kind who stays a moment longer. Who listens, even when it's hard. Who picks up the story where someone else left it. Because sometimes, the most unexpected stories aren't fiction. They're the ones waiting quietly at your doorstep, soaking in the rain, hoping someone will open the door. I did, and it changed everything.